Okay, welcome everybody. It's so exciting. This year we have had so many authors already, and it's just the beginning of May. I think Steve is our fourth or fifth author this year so far, and I have another three lined up, three or four lined up. I mean, they're just waiting. Yeah, everybody's lined up to speak. So we're going to do more of a dialogue than a presentation today. I'm going to talk to Steve. I have some questions about his book. And then we will open it up to questions from everybody. As we usually do, if you have questions while we're talking, go ahead and put it in the chat. And if it's something that we can address right then and there, we will. Otherwise, we'll wait until after we're through talking, and then we open it up to everyone. Okay? So please mute yourselves for now, and let's get started. Let me tell you about a little bit about Steve. And Steve was diagnosed with Parkinson's in his mid-50s. He turned to data, research, and personal experimentation to understand and manage the disease. Knowing that exercise is the only potential way to slow progression, he made fitness central to his life, training daily and competing in triathlons and obstacle course races, e.g. Spartans. I don't know what that is. You're going to have to tell us. And even racing up the Empire State Building stairs. Now that's impressive. Beyond personal health and wellness, Steve is deeply involved in Parkinson's advocacy and research. Living Parkinson's shares the strategies and real life stories that have helped Steve and others live full lives with Parkinson's. Steve lives in Connecticut and actively promotes the Living Parkinson's message. So, welcome, Steve. It's so nice to have you here. Before I ask you any questions, I just want to start with a very short story, which fits right into what you advocate for in the book. A couple years ago, I spoke to two different women who both lived in Los Angeles, both in their mid 70s, and they were both referred to me. The first one, everything I suggested, the answer was no, I can't. I can't do it. I can't walk. I can't. It hurts. It's this, it's that. The second one was, what can I do? I don't want anybody to know. I'm still working. I don't want my clients to know I have Parkinson's. How can I keep going? So it all comes down to attitude. Speaking to both of these ladies this last year, or keeping track of them, how do you think the first one is doing? Not good. She's in a nursing home now. The second one is fighting to be as normal as she possibly can. So attitude makes such a big difference in everything, especially with Parkinson's, how we approach it. And so, Steve, I hope I didn't take away from your story at all. Let's take the slide down and put the pictures up. Thank you. Okay. So Steve, let's start with you and your diagnosis story, which is pretty typical, I think, of most people. Tell us about that.
Sure. So roughly 7 years ago, about now, I was lying in bed with my wife, and she noticed my left hand was tremoring. It's my non-dominant hand. And, ironically, we joked about, she made the joke, maybe it's Parkinson's. It's a joke, literally. But I eventually got to a neurologist. I went to my primary care physician, who the second time I saw him in the summer sent me to a neurologist. The neurologist had me flip my hands, stomp my feet, which I think we all know now is a UPDRS exam. And he walked out of the room, came back and said, I think you have Parkinson's disease. But one of the things he said to me after that was interesting. He said, Parkinson's doesn't impact your life expectancy. And I will admit, it took me 2 or 3 days to get home and get the guts to Google Parkinson's life expectancy, because I was a little afraid of what I would see. But I did see that, in a way, they always say you die with Parkinson's, not from it, although that's kind of a little bit, could be a misnomer. Then I went for a second opinion in New York, and my New York doctor confirmed it. He sent me to Yale because it's near where I live in Connecticut for a third doctor. And they all kind of said the same thing. Yes, you have Parkinson's, but it doesn't, it shouldn't impact your life expectancy. So I kind of went off and just lived my life just as I did. I really didn't change much. I was always kind of into fitness and into health. So I just kind of kept doing everything normal. And probably about 2 years in, a couple things converged at the same time, which is one, I got involved in a study at Columbia University called PD Proactive, which was basically assigning me a therapist to basically talk about exercise and the value of exercise. I also found out I didn't have the genes associated with Parkinson's. I did the PD gene test. And the third thing was my doctor said, I think it's probably a setback in my mind. So when those three things happened, what it did is a spark kind of went off with me to say, look, I need to take this on head on. And maybe putting in the back of my mind saying, don't let it impact you every day. Don't think about it. It's good in a way, but I kind of feel like for me, it maybe wasn't that good. It wasn't as good because I didn't really address it proactively. And from then on, I really went to do everything proactively. My background is in engineering, so I like to break down problems. I'm kind of a nerd in that way. So I did a lot of reading. I took chapters of a course at Duke University on neuroscience because I knew a little bit about it because of my background. So I learned about what neurotransmission was, that it's an electrochemical process, and I could understand that. And really just try to build a program for myself to really be as proactive as possible. And for me, I kind of look at those first 2 years as a little bit of a lost opportunity, and that I wasn't doing as much as I could to kind of keep Parkinson's from gaining ground on me. So that's kind of how that's how I got to that first, what I call in my book, moment one, where I kind of, a spark went off and said, you can't just kind of sit back and let things go. You've got to make this a part of your everyday life. And I always tell people, Parkinson's doesn't keep me in bed. It's actually what gets me out of bed. I think about it all the time. I don't think of myself as separate. I think of Parkinson's as part of me, not, they say, don't let Parkinson's define you. I think it kind of does define me because it gives me the energy to go out and fight it every single day.
I absolutely agree with you on that. I think many of us had similar stories where we didn't do anything for a while. Happened to have been diagnosed with breast cancer the same week I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. So of course that took priority. And fortunately, I didn't have to have chemo. I just had radiation and a lumpectomy and radiation. But that consumed my life for the next 6 months, and it wasn't till I woke up from my radiation fog that I realized that the doctor I was going to was not doing me any good. And at that point, I decided it was time to make a change. And Parkinson's does that to you. And I hear that story over and over again. I didn't do anything for a year. I didn't do anything for 2 years, 5 years. And then suddenly there's some spark that goes off and it gets you moving. And, it sounds like the same thing with you. Everybody approaches it differently. But we were talking before, Steve has come up with 7 strategies that I think we all live by, whether it's the same names or not. Those of us who are doing well with Parkinson's live by those 7 strategies. They may be broken down differently, but it's basically how we all live our lives. Because if we don't move, we don't think positively, um, we're going to be like the first lady I talked to. We're going to be, in a nursing home within a year or two because we can't take care of ourselves. We have no desire to do anything. So, and obviously this moved you from you moved on to proactive management um, and then you came up with the structure for your book of these 7 strategies. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, I mentioned I was an engineer at heart, so I like to break down problems. But professionally, since I went to school for engineering, I became a marketer. And as a marketer, you like to package things up in very easy ways to communicate. And I had been talking to a friend of mine who is a author. He's a professional author. He's written a lot of books. And he said, Steve, the way you approach this is kind of interesting. Have you ever thought about writing a book? And I told him he was crazy. I've never thought about it. He asked me again. And I said, you're still crazy. And then New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2024, just before 2025, we were at a party and he asked me a third time. And I said, well, how would it kind of work? He said, well, I'll just kind of coach you. We'll talk about it. You kind of write a proposal, maybe pitch it and so on. And as we started to go through it, I started to realize that kind of what I had built was, the way I approached it was kind of I could break it down into these 7 strategies. And they're all, as you mentioned, interrelated in a way. So there's attitude, which is being very proactive. There's education, learning as much as you can about the disease. There's support, which is everything from friends and family to your doctors and your primary care team, which I say specifically, to other people with Parkinson's. Then exercises chapter is the 4th one, which we all know about. Wellness, I look at it as the 5th one, which just tilts the playing field in your favor. And then there's participating in research, which not only helps the cause, but you can use as a very good learning tool about your condition. And lastly, advocacy, which at least for me has turned into something that's really important because it's given me almost a new purpose, getting on calls like this, trying to help people. And I kind of structured it in a way that, everybody's Parkinson's is different, as you know. Well, also everybody's wired differently. Everybody approaches life differently. So I really structured it in saying, I do these types of exercises, but there's people that do a lot more than me. There's people that do a lot less. The way I look at exercise and a lot of this is set a goal that pushes yourself just a little, stretch to meet it, and then when you hit it, you feel good and you're on to the next one. And that goal could be different for everybody on this call. And I'll never say, just do this, just do that. It's all about try to stretch yourself a little bit or try to do a little bit of this. So I try to write the book in a way that it would work for whether you're just diagnosed, whether you've been diagnosed for a long time, and just in a way that everybody could take away tips. I was telling Sharon earlier, one of the tips in the wellness chapter, if you read Ray Dorsey and Mike Loken's book about all the impurities, is drink out of a stainless steel or glass cup. I mean, I got rid of all my plastic cups. It can't hurt, and it can only help. Plastic can leach stuff out. I just saw a research article that came out this week about microplastics and Parkinson's disease, which was interesting. So I consistently stay up to date. I talk about ways of setting a Google alert so you can get proactive emails once a week that tell you about the latest articles that come out on whatever topics within Parkinson's you like. And there's 35 tips like that in the book. So a lot of different things that's the way it kind of came about, but it was really somebody convincing me and kind of helping me through it. And as we built this framework, we realized that it wasn't real. The book was really more of a companion to the actual framework. And I would love to take this framework out with somebody and say, build it into a workshop, a course, if it can, really help people, because so far I've gotten pretty good feedback. I've been, very pleasantly surprised about it.
One of the things I've noticed, and with your book and a lot of the others that have come out recently, is that has made this year's batch of books different than previous books. These are by people with Parkinson's talking about living the experience with Parkinson's. We didn't see that before. It was always the experts telling us what to do. And now we're getting the lived experience. And I think that makes such a difference in how we all approach it. And I started because of what Michael Loken said when he talked to us in February. He said, everybody needs to tell this story. So people started sending me their stories, and we've been publishing them each week or each blog post. I include a story if I can. And the response has been really amazing because people can identify with what they're reading. And so when we're getting these books with the lived-in experience, it's providing the same thing. It's giving them something that they can identify that makes sense, And the experts, they have all their things that they say, but I don't always agree with them. What they say doesn't always work for me. You may find the same thing, It's like you don't eat dairy, don't eat this, don't eat that. My diet is a lot of dairy because I can't eat fish and I don't eat red meat. What do? You can't follow their diet if you can't eat what they say you have to eat. And I'm doing fine, I think, after 17 years. So anyway, let's talk about exercise. And what kind of exercise do you do now? Have you had to change it at all since you were diagnosed? Have you had to make changes in your exercise routine? Good or bad?
I've been very lucky. I'm 7 years in right now, almost 7 years. And as a matter of fact, I'm due a dose in about 10 minutes. So I'm probably pretty much flat. And I really don't have, except for a little bit of a tremor, I really don't have too many symptoms. So I've been very lucky. I don't know if I can take credit for it because we all don't know. It could be I just have a very non-aggressive form of Parkinson's. But exercise-wise, as I did the research and worked with the therapist, what I learned is a couple of things. I learned about the 4 components of exercise, which probably a lot of you know that the Parkinson's Foundation, and I think the American Academy, I think of exercise science put out, which is that aerobic, as high intensity as you can go, resistance, flexibility, balance. So, for aerobic, I just go out, I try to run a little bit, I try to bike a little bit, I swim a little bit, try to get as high intensity as I can. I learned the concept of an activity minute, which if you have a watch, what it is if you're familiar with all the different intensities of exercise, if you're in medium intensity exercise, which I think is like 60 to 75% of your heart rate max, 1 minute of exercise is one activity minute. But if you're between 75 or 70 and 80 or 90, 1 minute of exercise is two activity minutes. And the watches, like a Fitbit, can actually track that. So I shoot for about 150 activity minutes a week, which could be 150 mediums, 75 high intensity, or a combination of the two. That's my aerobic. The resistance, I've always lifted a little bit of weights. I do some weightlifting. For balance, I built a gym in my basement during COVID, and I buy a lot of little gadgets. And that's one of the things I like to talk about too. Is I bought this one thing. It's probably $20. It's a round plastic wooden platform with like a half moon ball on the bottom that, so it doesn't bounce. And I stand on with one leg for a minute. I try to stand twice a week, one on each leg. I have a speed bag and a heavy bag that I'll hit up. My wife and I will basically play ping pong sometime in our basement. I'll use both hands for that. And I've done some online yoga courses and qigong courses, which just get you to do nice, big motions and flexibility. So I just try to mix it up each week. I have a little checklist, so I'll check off what I do each week. And if I see I haven't done balance in a few days, I'll go down and do it. So I've tried to be a little bit more regimented about balancing the four. The biggest thing I found, and this is one concept of the book that I think was the most interesting thing of everything I learned. I learned a ton in writing it from everybody, and I still learn from everybody I talk to. But I learned about a concept called self-efficacy, which is really a person's belief that they can take charge of their own situation. I see Karen nodding. So I didn't know about this, Karen. Somebody told me about it. I love this concept. So what it is it's people that have more self-efficacy tend to think of things like you said, Sharon. I want to take control of the situation. I'll do the most I can. And there's actually ways to enhance it. It's a concept created written about by Alfred Van Der, Stanford University in the 70s. And what he talks about is ways you can enhance your self-efficacy. One way that I think I've always done, and I've really ratcheted up, is short-term goals. So if you hit short-term goals, what happens is I go and I sign up for these events that Sharon mentioned, like a triathlon, a Spartan event, or the Empire State Building stairs. And I finish it, and my wife will say, "Wow, you look exhausted. You're covered with mud. Do you regret it?" I'm like, "You kidding me? I'm 62 years old. I just finished this race. I can't wait to do the next one." And it's like throwing the log on the fire. And I think that's a huge, huge thing that all of us could take advantage of, as opposed to thinking of exercising for the next 10, 15 years. I'm just looking to my next event. I hit it, I win it, I get a medal, I put it up on my wall. I have a wall of fame with all my medals on it, which I look at, and I go on to the next one. The other things you can do to enhance your self-efficacy is see examples of people. And when I see Sharon, who says she's had Parkinson's for so long, doing as good as she is, I'm like, okay, I can do that. And then the third way is by getting support from friends, families, and just anybody in your network. So if we can all enhance our self-efficacy, I just think whether you have Parkinson's, another health challenge, or even a life challenge, that was like opening my eyes to something so interesting. And I had friends who don't have Parkinson's that have read the book that said that was something they're going to take away. And I'm sorry, I'm coming back to the exercise kind of roundabout, but that's another way that I really try to leverage the exercise that I do by doing these events.
Okay. Excuse me. Let's talk a little bit about wellness, the strategy of wellness.
That's an interesting one. I've always loved reading books on diet and wellness, and I was actually a big fan of the Blue Zones well before Parkinson's. It's just interesting. If you haven't heard of it, it's so people did some research basically to find the people that live the longest lives around the world, and they said, what do they have in common? And they came up with 9 different things. And it's not just like fad dieting. It's just like move naturally, family first. It's a really interesting concept. HBO did a special on it called Live to 100, I think. It was very, very interesting. But I've always been interested in wellness, and I have these little things I create for myself. One of them was the 4 pillars of wellness. So I look at wellness as exercise, which we talked about, nutrition, sleep, and either mindfulness or stress reduction, however you look at it. But it's really, to me, reducing stress. And I put that on a foundation of low toxicity living. Again, this is kind of a la Ray Dorsey, Michael Oken, trying to have natural products around. And those are the things that I really try to focus on. Exercise, as we talked about, is so critical. Nutrition, you mentioned, Sharon, again, doing, the Mediterranean diet. I try to stick to as much as I can. there's things I have, again, one of my little theories or one of my little approaches is if it can't hurt, I'll try it. So like I do cut out dairy because to me, if I put almond milk in my coffee instead of regular milk, it's not going to make a difference, right? I take certain supplements like fish oil, curcumin, resveratrol, because again, worst case, I'm wasting my money, but it's nothing that probably one out of every 20 people is taking also. So I've tried to take those things for anti-inflammatories in general, but without them seeing their doctor. But I almost look at wellness as if I follow all these rules, I can just tilt the playing field in my favor a little bit, get good sleep, really live a low stress life. And I feel lucky that I do live a low stress life. As I've gotten older, I've gotten a little bit wiser, and I've gotten to the point where I realize there's only so many things worth sweating over. And maybe your health is the only thing really worth it. I try to tell my kids all the time, you know, jobs aside, unless you get a call from a doctor saying your blood test came back and there's something wrong, you'll get through anything. It doesn't matter. And I really tried to live by that before Parkinson's and even after Parkinson's. So I think those are some of the things that I've kind of approached, like again, and even to your point also, Sharon, even with diet, I have my 85% rule, which says just do 85% because like I still enjoy a Guinness beer, I enjoy a bagel, I enjoy a piece of pizza, and I'm not gonna if I got rid of everything I'm not supposed to do, I wouldn't be that happy. So I do 85% of what I'm supposed to do, and the 15%, well, that's what I save for life's enjoyments. So those are all these things are things that little like tips and tricks I try to talk about in the book, just that maybe people can pick up and say, that's not a bad idea. I'll try that. So that's a little bit about the wellness section, but I do really believe pretty strongly in wellness, and I've always, I think whether you have a disease or you're fighting anything or not, it just can help you.
Okay. Um, so what did you learn during the process of writing this book? I've
Well,
been thinking about writing a book too, and it terrifies me. So go ahead. I want to hear what you learned.
Well, I mean, I interviewed experts for each one of the strategies, and I interviewed people with Parkinson's for each one of the strategies. And everybody I talked to, I learned from. I would say some of the biggest things I learned, the one that really jumped out at me the most, and I think you hit on this head on, I think and probably a lot of people on this call would just absolutely agree. So many people had gratitude, and it was gratitude for what they could control. And I think that plays now, it can be a chicken and an egg. I never try to make assumptions. So it could be that they're having a good journey with Parkinson's or a good progression. That's why they have the gratitude. Or it could be the gratitude, the positive attitude has contributed to their having a good journey. But it was really interesting that a lot of the people I interviewed all were like, well, Parkinson's, I never know what's around the corner, but I try to take control of this and that makes me feel good. And that's how I've approached it. So I did learn that was a big thing I learned. There was a lot of nuggets I learned from some of the different experts I interviewed. One of the most interesting things I'd say from a scientific perspective was from Ray Dorsey, who I now I've got to know pretty well because he's in New York near me. Is that he was saying how everybody basically will react differently to medications, and everybody reacts differently to toxins. So the same toxin that might have caused my Parkinson's, it could be smog, might not have caused anybody else's Parkinson's here. The same one that caused somebody else's, maybe drinking out of a plastic cup, or maybe having, not having organic vegetables might have caused there. And if you know what caused yours because of your genetic makeup, you can basically help your kids stay away from that too. And I thought that was really interesting. I never thought about the fact that, out of all these different impurities that we're all exposed to, we each one of us on this call, if we don't have the genes, might have a certain susceptibility to a different one. So that's why I've tried to, I look at the, from an organic standpoint, I try to do the clean 15, the dirty dozen. I look at that that the working group comes out with. I try to have personal care products that are now natural, like toothpastes and things like that. But again, because I don't know what impacted me, what caused my Parkinson's. So if I can do anything to kind of slow the progression, I'll try that. But that's a lot of the stuff I learned. There's some other really interesting nuggets that I could talk about that were really, really intriguing. But the biggest one was the gratitude, because that was more than one person.
Sorry, I had to turn my audio off so I didn't cough over you. Um, let's go through the 7 strategies and just tell everybody exactly, what they are And I will tell you that you may know these same strategies by another name. I think that we all live by these seven, 10 rules, whatever it is, however you want to break it down. So let's start with start from the beginning and go through the seven.
Sure, and I'll just go through them real quick. The first one is attitude, which again is to me it's about being as proactive as you can, taking as much control as you can. That's where self-efficacy really comes in because I think self-efficacy can impact your attitude significantly. The second one is education. It's a little bit of a corny term sometimes, but know your enemy. I want to know as much as I can about Parkinson's because the more I know about it, the more I'll know what might be a new symptom, what might not be a symptom. Things like, when I exercise, yeah, my tremor is going to get a lot worse. Or, my doctors will tell me if you're doing a triathlon or a Spartan race, you can take an extra pill beforehand, no problem. And again, those are things that I try to do. And the third one is support. And I broke that down into three things. One is the medical team. And I really try to highlight that to build a team, which doesn't have to, it's not just your primary care physician. It's not even just your pharmacist. It's not your moving disorder specialist. It can be a speech therapist. It can be a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a nutritionist. I mean, there's integrated medicine practices around here that have all those people in them, or you can build your own team. There's your friends and family. I talk a little bit about how I approach my friends and family, and my adult children do these events with me to kind of give me more motivation to do with them. And when I do these events with them, I mean, it creates lifelong memories for me that are just amazing. I went to Washington, D.C. and did advocacy twice in the past year, once with my son, once with my daughter. And it was just a great experience for all of us. And then there's also just the people around you, because again, people in a group like this, you can relate to what I'm dealing with more than anybody else. And I learned so much from people who, whether it's a certain medication that they might take or just something that happened with them, you learn so much from people around you. So that's the support chapter. Exercise, we kind of hit that one. That's pretty obvious. Wellness is the fifth one that we talked a little bit about. And then the last two were, as I started to think more broadly for myself, I got into things like research, right? So research, I'm kind of a nerd, a data nerd, a science nerd. So like one of the things I was doing is I joined some research studies, but I use research to not only to help the cause, but really to help myself and my advantage. One is I try to build relationships with anybody I meet with, any researcher. And two is I try to get baseline data. And I give you a couple of interesting examples. So I saw a study here in New York where they would give you a colonoscopy, which I was due anyway, and they would take some extra samples of your biome. We all know the connection between the gut and brain, I think. And what happened was they basically, did the colonoscopy. They took samples of my biome, and I said, "Can I get a printout of what you had?" And they gave me this spreadsheet, which had 500 lines of things that were completely incomprehensible. But long story short, I ended up meeting somebody who was at a company that made these new neurofiber bars, and they had a lot of science people on staff. I sent them a copy of my biome, and they said, "Wow, it was interesting. Our PhD said you don't look like you had Parkinson's based on your bio," which was interesting for now. But in the future, if they find there's a significant correlation, I have this baseline data. And I've also gone to labs where they've done mechanical testing, like watching you walk with all these sensors and turn and look at your motion. And I kind of hurt my hip where I was limping at one of my events. I went back to him and said, "Can I come in and you can do a retest and see if anything's changed?" And they did that and compared it. So you never know how you can use this data. I found that research in that way is a little bit, and there's a lot of studies that are observational that don't involve taking drugs. Like I don't do any, trials or studies like that, but anything that's observational, I really, really like. And the last one is advocacy. There's so many different kinds of advocacy. There's social media. There's just getting out into different groups. There's government or government advocacy. I've got involved in the government advocacy, and I've gotten involved with the Parkinson's Foundation. I'm an ambassador. I'm a research advocate, and I've reviewed grants. I really like speaking to groups, whether it's to lawmakers in DC, in my state, or even like this group. I just enjoy speaking. I enjoy talking about Parkinson's, and if it can help anybody else, it really makes me feel good also. And again, I told Sharon it wouldn't. if I could trade, I'd rather not have Parkinson's than have it. But given that I have it, it's kind of given me a new purpose, which is to try to just help as many people as I can. And that was the goal of the book. I'm going to donate any profits I make, a portion of them back to charity. I'm not looking to make money off of it. It was self-published. And I'm just trying to get out there as much as I can. So those are kind of the 7 strategies. And again, the book is not a medical book. I don't talk anything about the causes of the disease, anything about medications or treatments. I leave that up to the doctors because they know a lot more than me. This is more about just what anybody can probably do to take a little bit more control of their situation. Suggestions. That's kind of my 7, the overview of the 7.
Okay. Are you going to be speaking at the Congress in the Book Nook, correct?
Yeah, Living Parkinson's will be the book nook, and I have a meet the author session Wednesday at 12 o'clock, I think it is, on at the conference. So I guess I'm not sure to meet the author sessions, but I'll definitely be signing books if anybody wants to. I will not be selling them. I tell everybody to go to Amazon if they want to buy it. It's actually on Amazon doesn't let you control the price. I wish they did because I would give anytime I speak a code out where people could get a better price. But they did put it on sale for like $16, so it's pretty reasonable. And again, my goal is just to help as many people as I can. And once I start turning profitable, which I'm close, I'm going to basically just start giving a portion of that back to all the people that have helped me out, like Larry at PD Avengers, the Fox Foundation, the Parkinson's Foundation, etc.
Okay. I'm going to open it up to questions. You can raise your hand, make sure you turn your mic off. It's a small group, so if you want, if I don't see you raise your hand, just ask your question. Anybody? Karen, you always have questions. Come on.
I saw Karen.
I'm not sure. I can't count on my background noise today. I just want to thank you for what you're doing, the self-efficacy, positive attitude, exercise, right down to your 15%. Yeah, you can't follow every rule in the book every day and still have any quality of life. I'm listening, I'm hearing, and I like everything you're saying. And I look forward to meeting you at the WPC along with a whole bunch of other people who are going to be there. But yeah, a lot of what you're saying I've learned to be true too. I'm in my 10th year since diagnosis. And yeah, I admire that you're just taking every opportunity, but at the same time, one day at a time, one medal at a time. You can't do everything overnight, but the combination of everything you're doing, it's obviously working, and sharing our story is the most important thing. The more we share our stories, the better chance we have to help find a cure for this in our lifetime, hopefully, but definitely in our children's lifetime.
No, it's interesting. One of the things that I always told my doctors, this was probably it goes back 2 years when I was 60 years old, because now I'm 62. I told them, I said, look, I'll keep up this exercise for 10 more years, and then it's on you. And I did realize one thing from talking to certain researchers. They said, be careful when you do throw out, this was to me, talking about a cure, because a cure is a tough thing. And I would agree, all I'm really looking for is stop the progression. If I'll keep this exercise up, I'm 62 till I'm 70. But if they have 8 years and they have some way of just keeping me like where I am, I think right now I'd sign up for that right now.
Yeah. Years ago, and some of you have heard this story, I went to the World Parkinson's Congress in Portland in 2015, and Tom Isaacs was the keynote speaker of the opening, and he made a statement that has stayed with me ever since. They always tell us we're 5 years from a cure, but you go 5 years goes by, we're still 5 years from a cure. It's constantly, it never stops. It's a moving target. We may be down to 4.5 years now. I'm not sure. Here it is 10 to 12 years later, but the cure is still elusive, and it's always going to be in the future. And yes, I agree. If disease modifying strategies is, for those of us who have it, is really important. Okay, any other questions? Anybody?
If there's no questions, I can tell you one really interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, Mary, you might have a question.
Yeah, what is your understanding of the gut biome and the blood-brain barrier, and how diet may help in
You
those
know,
areas? And
it's definitely a tough thing, like to think like there's so much complexity to it because I know there's like billions of different bacteria in your gut. The only things I know for a fact, not being a medical expert, is that the biggest nerve in your body is the vagus nerve, which goes from your stomach to your brain, and that there are
mm-hmm,
some theories that just like you might inhale something and it might go from your nose to your brain, that if you eat something and it's in your gut, in your gut you have like I guess a leaky gut potentially, like which can be different causes. It can actually traverse up that nerve to your brain, and that's how you can get the alpha synuclein clumps. And but again, a lot of this is all it's so speculative that all these different things. But that's they just I just heard a ton more about the gut and the brain are very interrelated, and that
mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody really knows too much more than that. They all have their theories.
Thank you.
Sure. I will tell you one interesting thing because I know that as Sharon mentioned, you're a very educated audience. Somebody was telling me about a study. I don't know if you've heard, but one of the things they say that helps or that correlates with lack of Parkinson's is smoking. They say people that smoke tend to have less instance of Parkinson's. They said obviously don't take up smoking. But one of the things I also heard was that people in high altitudes sometimes also will experience that their symptoms aren't as bad. And both of those things are lack of oxygen. So they're actually doing tests on hypoxia, putting people in a like a chamber where they're actually deprived oxygen to see if that impacts them in any way, which it's just very intriguing. I don't know if they know the answer, but I thought that was just really interesting because if you think about what exercise does too, exercise probably sends a lot of the oxygen to your muscles as opposed to your brain. So I've been trying to do some research on a concept called autophagy, which again, I'm not a medical expert or anything, but it's an interesting topic. It's basically when you stress your cells out, sometimes they excrete the garbage that's in there. And some people believe that garbage in your cells is what eventually can cause some of the clumping of the alpha synuclein in your brain. I mean, this is all completely speculative, but it's kind of interesting stuff. I think Karen has her hand up again.
That's what I was trying to say.
Um,
Karen, go ahead.
Again, it's another more gratitude. Like you said, gratitude's big. Another thank you for saying, yeah, you're not a medical expert. You wrote this book. This is more for experience and relatability. Thank you for your full honesty there. But as far as the high altitude thing, it's another thing of everybody's different. The high altitude where I used to live in Colorado near the Grand Mesa was actually making my symptoms worse. And now that I've moved back to California, back down to sea level, it has, made a lot of those more obvious symptoms mellow out. So, and the doctors here have actually said that being in that high altitude for as long as I was altered my blood too. It made it more of a higher iron content and a thicker, heavier thing. So it just depends on the person. There, like they say, one person with Parkinson's is one person with Parkinson's. But it's very interesting that what you just said, that you've heard the opposite. Where in my case, it wasn't. It was so.
The smoking, the high altitude was almost like something I heard almost anecdotally. The smoking is something that that's been documented. If you look at like a lot of the correlations, people will say that smoking tends to be a good thing. Even some of the researchers will say that. But I completely agree with you. And one of the things I always try to do when I speak or I try to do in the book is never make any assumptions, about anybody else. Because even when it comes to the attitude part, I mean, I don't have physical depression. It's part of my Parkinson's. But I can't relate in any way what it's like to have physical depression and how that might impact you. And to say to somebody, just get up and get moving, I would never say that to anybody because if I'm not walking in their shoes, I have no right to say anything about their situation. So that's why everything I try to talk about is suggestions what might help you.
Yeah, the psychosocial emotional side of what this medicine and the disease combo does to you is either equally or worse than what it does to the motor symptoms, honestly. And yeah, that's where sharing all of our stories is so important. And again, thank you for everything you're doing here for us today and for everybody with your book.
Yeah, I
You're
have one
welcome.
friend who was diagnosed 2 years ago, and every time she calls me, if she, is this a symptom? Is that a symptom? I said, everything can be a symptom. We don't know. There's 57 known symptoms of Parkinson's, and how many unknowns? You know, everybody's affected differently.
Yeah. That's why it's so hard, like to even give advice. You can't even almost give advice because what might work for somebody might not. And again, we're all just not only, again, to the point you mentioned, not only is everybody's Parkinson's different, but we're all just different humans. We all just react differently to different situations. Some people, I literally called my wife and said, Hillary, I have Parkinson's. They said it's not that big a deal. I just went to work and that was it. Like, I've heard some people, it was just different, but that's not, I don't know if that's good, bad, indifferent, but it was just how I reacted. And everybody's going to react differently. Everybody's going to try to take different tips in their own way. So I mean, it's in that regard, you can't just say do X or do Y, and that's why I really try to stay away from that.
Anybody else? No more questions? It's very quiet group this morning. Let's see. Okay, let's see how many people are doing any of these things. Let's start with number one, which was attitude. Do you think your attitude has made a difference in how you feel? Just raise your hands. I can't see a lot of you. A lot of you have your cameras off. But yeah, attitude makes a huge difference. Number two, what?
Oh, that was me, Karen, again. Yeah, most definitely. And that's where, Yes and Exercise has helped me, along with all of your groups with their programs and exercise and diet, has helped me keep my attitude up more than years of therapy.
Yeah. Okay. Number two was, remind me, Steve.
Education, just learning as much as you can about Parkinson's.
What?
Education, learning as much as you can.
Education. Okay. Well, you're all here, which means you're educating yourself, right? Okay. Number three.
Three is support, both your doctors and just your support.
Okay. Four.
Exercise.
Exercise. Who is exercising in this group? Everybody. Yes. Okay. Well, there was five. Six.
Oh, no,
Or did I skip?
five was wellness. Five was wellness.
Oh, well. Okay. Wellness. All right. And then six was,
Advocacy.
okay.
And
Are you
seven was
advocating for yourself or for anybody else? Think about it. By coming here, you're learning what to ask your doctors. You're learning to speak up. That's advocating for yourself, whether you think about it or not. We hope that we're giving you tools to use that you can speak up and talk to other people. That's one reason why you need to tell your story. You need to know your story so that you can talk to other people about Parkinson's. There's so many different facets with the advocacy. Okay, and the last one,
research, participating in research.
in research. Anybody participate in research studies? Yeah, this is a pretty proactive group.
Some of the research studies literally are just online surveys, right?
Mhm.
I've done online surveys from so many universities just because, look, anything I can give them will help them. I give, and I'll be honest, everybody's got their own personal, has to really think about what they're willing to do and not do. I'm a little bit reserved when it comes to things like cerebral spinal fluid, spinal taps. But if they want blood, saliva, skin samples, anything, that I have no problem doing. So, everybody's going to have their own, comfort zone.
Mhm. Okay, we've
I have
got a
a
couple of really
question.
nice thank yous. Okay, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, what is your experience with your diet. I know for myself, sometimes if I eat sugar, it affects my brain. I can't walk well. It seems to interfere with the medications. Have you done any testing to see what food is good for you, bad for you, reacts with you?
You know, I'm pretty lucky in that I've always had like a really good stomach that doesn't get bothered by very much. The only thing I've noticed, which I think is pretty common, is if I have a super high protein meal, it will kind of interfere with my medication. Like, every once in a while I go to there's this one holiday dinner where I end up eating more meat than I eat the whole rest of the year almost. And like my medicine just doesn't work for like 3, 4 hours afterwards because I think I'm on such a protein overload. But little tips. I try to do a couple other things. Like whenever I take a pill, I try and drink as much water as possible because I believe, and again, I'm not medical, that it gets absorbed in your small intestines,
Yeah.
and the more it can flush it down, maybe I feel like that could help. So I try to do that. But I have not had any interactions with diet and just my symptoms or anything like that. I have not noticed that.
Have you noticed when you exercise that you need more medication?
I know that when I exercise, my tremor will be worse right afterwards, which my doctor said, yes, that happens. Don't worry. And he does tell me if I'm going to do a big race or something where I'm going to exert myself, take an extra pill. It's not a big deal. That again, I would not say that to everybody else. That's just
Right, right.
but that's at least what he's told me. So I mean, when I do like Sharon had asked, what's a Spartan obstacle course race? I can tell you, Sharon, it's basically you're outside, you run about 3 miles, and you have 20 obstacles, everything from throwing a spear to going underwater to carrying a 100-pound ball, just doing all these things outside, climbing up ropes. And if I'm doing one of these events for 2, 3 hours where I'm really going to exert myself, I will take an extra pill about a half an hour before or 40 minutes before. I'll try to time my pills out that way. But I don't really notice. Again, I've been pretty lucky in that even now, like I'm late for my medication. Sometimes I'll forget and I'll go 2 hours late and I'll just notice it because I looked at the clock. I don't have that much off time even right now. So I'm not sure I'm a good example or a good person to ask for that.
Well, thank you for your insight. I appreciate that.
It's so hard because we're so different, like we've been just talking about. Like, one person, I would say one thing people have asked me, I rely a lot on my doctor. Like I found a doctor that I think has a really good, I'm just comfortable with his approach. When I see my doctor, I always bring a list of the questions to ask him. That's another tip I give is to bring a list of questions and keep a pad of paper with you. And the first 20 minutes is just talking. What maybe symptoms have I seen? What research have I read? What is he like? What is he not like in terms of research? Anything interesting? And then he'll examine me. But I really take the most and try to make the most of that time to say, look, I'm now spending time with an expert and I'm paying for it. So I don't just want him to examine me. I want to pick his brain as much as I can. And I
Right.
go in with questions written down so I don't forget them. And I write the answers down so I don't forget them when I leave.
Sounds like you have a
I,
wonderful
t- I
doctor.
I
Yeah, I
just,
take a list of questions, and then I forget to take it out of my bag or whatever. But the fact that I've written it down, it's gone from my head to my hand. It's I usually get most of them. There's always one or two things I forget, but that's okay. And it depends how receptive your doctor is. I can email her and she'll just get back to me with the answer quickly. So,
that's another thing we talked about in another one of these calls is that I take advantage of my chart. If you have my chart, like
Yeah,
if
yeah.
I just say if one of you said, hey, I read this really interesting paper about black pepper and Parkinson's or whatever, I might just email him and say, hey, have you heard anything about this? Just in my chart. I mean, again, learn it to the education, learn as much as you can, take advantage of their knowledge. I mean, they're spending all their time reading research and they understand how to interpret it, And again, like my doctor's pretty pragmatic. That's why I like him. He'll say, well, yeah, there's some indications of that, but on the other hand, it's not been proven when it went to a trial. So, and then I'll kind of usually kind of go with him, and I might say, well, I might try to take it anyway, and go, well, if you want to, then why don't you do it like this? So I'll kind of have a real conversation with him. I try to keep my appointments like that a lot.
And
okay.
the other last
Kathy?
question I have is how did you make arrangements for the stool sample to be sent for analysis? I know they're doing it out in California.
So this was part of that study I did at Cornell Weill Hospital.
Oh,
They basically
Cornell. Okay.
This was they literally I found on one of the trial finders, like Fox Foundation is a trial finder where they put
Okay, okay.
trials. And I looked up ones that this might have been this is observational, so I always look up observational ones. And this one said we'll do a colonoscopy and we'll basically take a sample.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
also did send out there was a service I googled at one point a couple years ago services to do like a biome a profile, and they rated them, and I probably paid like maybe $100 to send a sample to one of them, and they sent back. So I have that too, but it's just something that I filed away, and I figure maybe it'll help, maybe it won't. But if 5 years from now they say, well, these things are really good, and these bacteria are good, these are bad, and it's interesting to see how they
Mm-hmm,
progress,
mm-hmm.
I actually have that baseline. So
Yeah,
um, you never know. That's why I do think about research in that regard.
I think that's great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you. This has been wonderful, and I know everybody's probably going to go out and get your book now. Um, I know I've been enjoying reading it. And well, Marina, can you put up our next slide? We have a couple more authors coming up because that's everybody's out there. So next week is Mother's Day, and Naomi Astolas, who some of you know, has a book out called I Laugh at My Mom Who Has Parkinson's Disease. And she put this book together with her daughter Ruby. And it's pretty funny. You can see the illustration on the left, and that's just indicative of the book. She talks about everything you can imagine, good, bad, embarrassing, whatever that has happened because of Parkinson's. It's a very cute book. So that's our Mother's Day treat. And then the following, after the Congress, on May 31st, Christine Meldrum is returning to talk about her new book, How to Build a Parkinson's Exercise Cocktail Plan. And I know that a lot of people joined us the last time she spoke about her first book, which is, what's the name of the book? I got it right here.
I have it right in my
Um,
bookshelf.
How to Reduce Symptoms Through Exercise. So this is her first book, and I know a lot of you are familiar with this one. The second one is really geared towards trainers and physical therapists. And so if you want to share this and bring your if you have a personal trainer, bring them to the meeting, have them join us. It will be to your advantage because they'll learn about the things that work for Parkinson's. So that's the next two. We have in June, we have another author coming up. Jim O'Connell, who was a copy editor for Bloomberg News, and his writing reminds me a lot of Dave Barry. It's very funny, and he's going to be speaking to us in June, and I have somebody else after that. But it's been one author after another. So my stack of books behind me keeps getting higher and higher, and these are all books that I think you will enjoy. And other than that, I will see a lot of you at in Phoenix. And this is just our usual end of the speech. But I will see a lot of you in Phoenix. We are going to have, if you are not yet in our WhatsApp group, let me know. We need to add you to the WhatsApp group because that's where we will be sending out texts about what's happening. We are going to have a whole group of us sitting together at the opening. We have a dinner on Monday night for those who are there. If you've not signed up for the dinner, it's almost sold out. So you need to do that today. And we have a table in the exhibition area where we will be gathering at different times during the day. So you get to meet up with other Twitchies. And with that, I think we can turn the
Sure.
recording off.
Sharon,
And if anybody wants to hang out and just talk, feel free to.
Sharon, I was going to say for the audience, I do have a website, livingparkinsons.com. I'm on Facebook at livingparkinsons.com. I have a YouTube channel, Living Parkinsons, and then I have an Instagram account. So if anybody's, and that's stuff that's just I kind of put some information up there, and I have links up there, and I'm not like some of the bigger social posters, but I try to put a couple things up. But I really enjoy meeting everybody here, and it sounds like you guys have a really good group that's very well educated. You're all doing pretty good, which is really a nice thing to see.
Mm-hmm.